Investigations are colliding today as two key witnesses in the impeachment investigation were arrested late last night and charged with separate campaign finance violations. Two associates of Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are being charged by federal prosecutors with conspiracy, falsification of records, and lying to the FEC about nearly $1 million in donations they made to a pro-Trump super PAC last year. Both men, who are American citizens but were born in Ukraine and neighboring Belarus, had been scheduled to appear before Congress this week about their connection to Rudy Giuliani's efforts to pressure Ukraine for dirt on the Biden family. It's just another complication for House Democrats who are trying to figure out how to proceed after the White House declared war on their investigation and pledged to block all administration officials from testifying. So far, the word is subpoenas, subpoenas, subpoenas.
Subpoenas will be received by all of the people that the Congress wants to talk to. They will ignore those subpoenas at their peril. You don't get to say no to a congressional subpoena.
But some argue the Democrats will need to fight fire with fire. In a New York Times op-ed, Cornell law professor Josh Chaffetz says the House should play hardball and have the House Sergeant-at-Arms simply arrest people like Rudy Giuliani and others who refuse congressional subpoenas. And if the House is too squeamish for that, he suggests using the power of the purse and zeroing out funding for the White House counsel's office in November. Joining me are Bruce Singal, who worked alongside Robert Mueller in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston, was among more than 1,000 former federal prosecutors to sign a memo arguing the president did obstruct justice. Bruce, good to see you. Gautam Mukunda is a Harvard Kennedy School fellow, author of Indispensable When Leaders Really Matter. Gautam, it's good to see you as always. Can we start with Chaffetz? Is he on to something? Is it time to fight harder, to let the Sergeant of Arms arrest someone like Giuliani if he's in contempt, or does it have potential to alienate people who are skittish about impeachment to begin with?
I think if they're going to proceed with impeachment and be defied the way they are by the Trump administration, they need to show they're serious, and they need to arrest, and they need to hold people in contempt, and they need to go to court to enforce the subpoenas.
But Chaffetz is suggesting, he says in his piece, forget court. Just have the Sergeant of Arms. The power hasn't been used since, I think, 1937, he said it, but they have the power. Just have the Sergeant at Arms. You hold someone in contempt, have him or her, I don't know what the Sergeant of Arms, what gender he or she is, have him arrest the person. Is that too much?
Well, I think you're probably going to end up in court very quickly on that. But let's not forget that a woman sat in jail for 18 months during the Clinton process for not answering questions before she was allowed out of jail. So the Republicans were serious then. I think the Democrats have to do so here as well.
Is it too tough?
So they may not have a choice. The problem is that if Barr is so corrupt or corrupted by Trump as he appears to be, the Attorney General, that he simply refuses to enforce contempt of Congress.
He's been held in contempt. He's not going to prosecute himself.
So exactly. But this is sort of the flaw in our system, that it relies on the Attorney General to act with integrity. Since Barr was chosen, presumably, not to do that, the only way you can sort of act against the Republicans at all is through these irregular but entirely constitutional procedures.
You know, I am generally of the opinion that you fight as tough as your opponent fights, no matter what the thing. However, there are 3 polls in 3 days, the last 3 days, on whether the president not should be impeached but should be removed from office. 49%, I think it was in the Washington Post, maybe 48, I'm not sure. Politico, 50%, and Fox News, 51%. By the way, when the Fox News poll came out, the president, acting very presidential, said, whoever their pollster is, they suck. That was the president of the United States. In a tweet, that might suggest that Nancy Pelosi's on to something, essentially that the president may be impeaching himself every day and just stay the course on the part of the Democrats.
So the numbers are swinging against Trump in a way that's devastating for him. It's worth noting Richard Nixon hit 50% 1 week before he resigned office.
That's
so
a
this
very
is
good point.
Really bad for him. And it's not just Nancy Pelosi. The news cycle is going against him. There was a book that came out a couple of days ago in which there were 43 credible accusations of sexual misconduct, including assault, against Trump, and it barely made the news because it's not even close to the worst thing that's come out about him in the last week.
I didn't even hear about it until today, I'm embarrassed to admit. That's absolutely right. So can we talk about this legal thing for a second also? How big a deal are these 2 indictments? Is it a big deal? Or is it just a footnote in this whole investigation?
Well, it is a big deal in this sense. On its face, at first blush, it appears to be a traditional campaign finance violation case. But when you look closer, you see that the violations were committed by people who were accused of trying to gain influence into the American process through these campaign finance violations for the purpose of furthering some of the very things that Congress is looking into for Trump now. For example, to obtain the dismissal of the Ukrainian ambassador, Yovanovitch, if I'm pronouncing her name
correctly. She's supposed to testify tomorrow. We have no idea if she's going to testify.
No idea, but the indictment is the indictment is explicit in saying this is one of the purposes that was being advanced by these two individuals.
You know, the thing that I thought was interesting about this was brought, and this hasn't been played up much, so maybe I'm exaggerating the impact. This is brought by the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is not Cy Vance, the Manhattan's DA. This is the federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York who is a friend or ally, Berman, of Trump's. Does that have some, I mean, that's a pretty big deal, isn't it? By the way, this is the same guy who recused himself in the part of the Cohen investigation because of his connection to Trump.
It's striking because one of the really worrying developments of the last couple of weeks was when the Southern District filed a brief saying that Trump essentially did not have to answer questions. It was an extraordinary, it was just, I'm not a lawyer, even I could see it was wrong. And it was way out of the ordinary for them to do that. So we were all worried that the Southern District, which is fabled for its independence, the sovereign district.
Pre-Barara, most recently under a Democrat,
might have been corrupted by Trump. The fact that this happened suggests that maybe we should have more hope than we did a week ago.
It is significant that an ally of Trump's, not an ally, a friend of Trump's, a Trump nominee, a Trump appointment, Berman is the man behind these prosecutions, right?
I think it is surprising. And when you have the president calling this another hoax, and you have his appointee indicting people for committing violations directly related to the so-called hoax, yes, that's very
and connected to his personal lawyer. Speaking of what the president said, here's the president on Monday talking about removing troops from northern Syria. Here he is.
Turkey, Syria, let them take care of it. Let them take care of it.
Well, here's how they're taking care of it. The Turks have entered northern Syria, killing Kurds, our former allies. The president shrugged off the likely escape of ISIS soldiers that the Kurds have been holding, saying, and I thought this was a joke at first, well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. He went on to say that the Kurds, 11,000 of whom, by the way, died as part of our mission to eradicate ISIS, he dismissed it, saying they didn't help us in World War II. While bad judgment is not impeachable, does this action, which has inspired bipartisan outrage, which we almost never see, does it have potential to break off a Republican or two who says, I just can't deal with this guy anymore, I'm signing on to the impeachment thing?
The key fracture point will be the Republicans who either have announced or are planning to retire instead of run for re-election. They have no political agenda. Their worst-case scenario is they get on corporate boards and be millionaires.
A House member today who announced he was resigning and said because of Syria, he could no longer support the president. Didn't say he was supporting impeachment, but no longer supporting the president.
I don't know if it'll be enough, but one hopes. I mean, it's like you cannot express the level of betrayal that what Trump has done here, and it wasn't a one-off thing. This clearly was planned for months because the Turks were ready to go as soon as they got the green light. And you don't launch military operations on the spur of the moment; you plan them. The Kurds have fought by our side for years. They were promised our protection, and now their civilians are being shelled by the artillery of what is supposedly a NATO ally. As we abandon them, and as our own soldiers are on the ground begging for permission to protect their comrades in arms. This is, even for Trump standards, this is an abomination that I'm almost speechless to just try and express my rage at what's happened.
And I think most people with whom I've spoken who are decent souls have expressed, indecent souls, have expressed a lot of outrage. So I'm almost embarrassed to ask the political question again. I know it has formally nothing to do with impeachment. But if Republicans, are as enraged as they appear to be over this, does it have potential spillover effect onto this thing where most Republicans have been mute?
I think it does. Let's not forget that, like so many other actions Trump has taken, this one is consistent with Russian interests. And so you have the president taking action not only in support of the Turkish strongman, autocratic strongman he supports, but an interest that is one that furthers Russian interests as well.
And furthers his own economic interests because he's got hotels. You know what I worry about in this one? I'm trying to figure out why did the president, even though he's very impulsive, speak to Erdogan on the phone and either without consulting with state and Pentagon leaders or in contravention to their advice, do this. I say to myself that he's made a calculation that as much as, and I think you're representative, people who are paying attention to this care a lot about it and are upset about it, the American people don't give a damn. Am I wrong about that?
You may be. Strikingly, this is just about the first issue on which the evangelical leadership has fractured from
Wonderful
Trump.
point,
And
by the way.
This is the sort of there's all these people who have Trump plays 12-dimensional chess, and this is evidence number 1 million that actually he doesn't know what he's doing. At this moment in time, when he needs to maximize his political strength on the Senate, he has taken just about the only act I can imagine that would fracture the Republican Party in the Senate. It is astonishing.
Or maybe there's a method to his impulsivity, if that's a word, and he says, you know what we're doing? We're talking about Syria, even though we're being critical, and what we're not talking about is we're not talking about impeachment, which I'm sure worries him a lot more, I assume worries him a lot more, than criticism over an anti-humanitarian effort in northern Syria. Does that make sense? Or
Well,
no?
it does. It does seem that every time a major crisis arises that subjects Trump to great criticism, he creates a new crisis of his own making to divert from it.
Can we move on to one more topic, totally unrelated to this? I often criticize the president for flip-flopping on issues from one day to the next. But these days, one of the Democrats looks to replace him in 2020 is giving him a run for his money. After suffering a heart attack last week, Bernie Sanders still has not given any details of how severe it was, and he's been delivering a series of mixed messages ever since.
I'm feeling so much better. See you soon on the campaign trail.
I think we're going to change the nature of the campaign a bit. Make sure that I have the strength to do what I have to do.
I misspoke the other day. We're going to get back into the groove of a vigorous, very vigorous campaign.
So in addition to flip-flopping about the campaign, which is not the biggest deal in the world, but it's something, this comes against the backdrop of, again, refusing to provide information on how severe the heart attack was, and more significantly to me, not allowing reporters to speak to his doctors. I maybe lose perspective on this thing. Is this damaging, or does it get lost in this whole morass of impeachment talk and Syrian talk, Bruce?
Well, I think it's damaging. What's damaging are the health issues themselves. And their correlation to his age and to his appearing in public appearances to show that age. So I think that's the biggest harm to him.
Well, you know, in addition to that, as I said the other night, there's a guy who's only 2 years younger than him, Joe Biden, who also had health problems. That was admittedly a couple of decades ago, 76. And while Elizabeth Warren's one of the most energetic people I've ever seen on a campaign trail, she's no spring chicken either. She's 70 years old. Do his age and health problems trickle down to the others, or no?
They may to Biden. I think Warren not. First, because her energy levels appear to be infinite. You try staying in a selfie line for 4 hours.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
Or running to every event. And she's 70 years old. She's not 76,
and
she's 78.
And she's younger, and she's female. And, of course, women live longer than men.
That's a very good point.
I think that the transparency point that you made is actually the crucial one. I mean, look, I hope I have Bernie Sanders' energy levels at 50, much less than 78. But I'm on this issue. This is what I write about, is about leader evaluation, and this I'm a hardcore on this issue. We absolutely must have complete transparency on any serious presidential candidate on medical issues. They are just too significant in terms of what they can do to judgment to allow them to go unevaluated.
So Dr. Ronnie Jackson should be evaluating everybody. Is that correct? Gautam, it's good to see you. Thanks so much, Bruce. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jim.